Back. It's always good to have a break, and then you can sit down, relax, and catch up on what's been going on with the world. Oh. Okay. Yeah, just, since you were, away, but... Oh, look, the IEA have an energy report. That's really cool. The International Energy Agency's energy report is surely going to be good because we've had tons of solar and renewable rollout over the past few years. In fact, 2024 was the 23rd consecutive year of renewable rollout that was at record levels, so the IEA report should be good.
Sorry, the service requested is not available. Thank you for calling. Please hang up.
Look, I'm gonna do my best here, not to make the kind of video where you watch it and then you crawl in a hole afterwards and ask your pets to please bury you. Easier though that would be to write, because let's just say the IEA report isn't a smorgasbord of positivity. But giving in and admitting defeat isn't an option, and there are ways out of the horrors, and we can. As a society and as a species, we can do it. We can tackle climate change and not end up with most of the planet unlivable to humans, living in the kind of hellscape that dystopian futures have always presented. We can do it and not be forced to flee the Earth, ending up planetless hobos scouring the galaxy for a new home. On the plus side, that does mean that the self-elected Lord and Saviour of the human race, the Kaiser of Mars, will be able to jump forth and tell us he was right all along. Oh, and would you mind just jumping in that rocket ship over there with your life savings organised into nice, neat piles of counted bills, so he can look after them and get even wealthier, and discovering that you're not the type of people that he wants on the ship because, something replacement theory? But I'm not going to pretend that things are going well. In the US, currently, at least notionally in charge, we have a man with roughly the intelligence of a racist cucumber, asset stripping the US government and using the funds to install gold lame padded toilet seat cushions and Home Depot tchotchkes in the whatever will remain of the White House once he's done with the bulldozers.
Behind every DIY
is more help than you think.
And some things have just got to go.
Don't worry, these will go quick.
What are you working on?
Enabled by a supporting party that wouldn't know an ethics violation if it bit them, and funded as he was by deep-throating the fossil fuel industry's definitely not bribery hose, Trump's policies reflect that, so... yeah, the words conflict of interests are kind of inadequate. In Europe, there are some countries that seem to be trying, at least somewhat, to not completely shred our environment in the name of pouring money into the fossil fuel industry's ever-hungry maw. But that's contrasted with some that seem to think, like the US, that if you point at everyone who's a bit different and shout about how terrible they are, that'll save you from dealing with catastrophic flooding and crop failures. I'm not sure how they think that will work, because we've already wandered off the nice, safe path and are into the bit of the map that says, "Here be dragons." Significant crop failures are likely less than a decade away, with mid-century penciled in for significant food shortages. So yeah, that's not looking great right now. Yes, we were once hoping not to pass 1.5 degrees of warming by, oh, I don't know, 2030, and last I checked it wasn't 2030 yet. Nope. But last year we passed 1.5 degrees of warming, which, despite the people who really don't understand the science denying it, is objectively a really bad thing. And I say that as someone lucky enough to live in a bit of the country where warming will probably not be utterly disastrous, except for, you know, the majority of the downtown core of where I live being made into a saltwater swimming pool. And of course, chronic food, energy, and resource shortages. Still, I guess with half the US being unlivable, our property values will go up, so yay that. 2024 was the hottest year on record. Yeah, this is my stunned face. And unfortunately, that's not just because I refined my sense of fashion even more than I previously had, though obviously that probably didn't help. As I said, we just passed 1.5 degrees Celsius of planetary warming, and the only reason it's not more is because almost 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered in water, and water has a very high specific heat capacity compared to, say, land. For example, 4 joules of energy roughly will warm 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius, but that same amount of energy will warm a gram of granite by about 5 degrees Celsius. Yes, that is 5 times as much. So all that energy that's being sucked up by the water, it means that changes are happening now, but they're slow and they take a long time to be reflected in temperature changes that we will really notice planet-wide. The oceans, seas, and lakes absorbing lots of that energy and temperature not changing that much. That's one of those things that's finite, and it also means that when, and I do mean when, we start to see the massive shifts that are a result of the stupidity now, they're going to be fast and furious, and they're going to take a long time to undo.
And the land ice melts enough to fall in. Oh, it's everywhere! It's everywhere!
And the thing that perhaps is hardest to deal with in the IEA report is that in an era when we need unprecedented cooperation between governments to tackle the existential climate change challenge to human existence on this planet, we are instead seeing less cooperation and more insular behaviour. And here, I'm obviously not referring to our current situation of being unprecedented because our president is a Russian asset whose "I'm not a paedophile" t-shirt is failing to answer some pretty significant questions. Wait. Russian asset. That gives me an idea. One moment. Hello, All American Asset Management? You have a problem with your president, and you'd like to... You want to return him for a refund? Yeah. Have you tried turning him off and back on again? No, he's kind of a turn-off already. Do you have receipt? No? Well, anyway, all our presidents are final sale, and I fear the original purchaser must contact us if there is problem. This one is listed as Chevron. Are you Representative Chevron? Okay, No? Hello? Damn. Thought I had a good idea for a second. But yes, the IEA point to increasing geopolitical instability, which, in less politically understated terms, is mostly the right of the far right and right-wing nationalism, in response to increasing anxiety about... Not that right-wing nationalism does anything about it, but it tells nasty little lies that give people who are scared someone to blame. As an apt shirt I saw recently put it, you're looking at the wrong 1%. Alongside that, however, it increases the insularity of countries and decreases cooperation, making it harder for us as a unified whole to tackle the challenges. Instead, countries are prioritising energy quote-unquote security. In some parts of the world, that means a strong focus on renewables and increased efficiency. In other parts, it means drill, baby, drill, planet inferno. And at the moment, despite the fact that increasingly getting energy from oil is a net negative, ironically requiring us to pull in energy from renewables or nuclear to refine it to the point that we can burn it to release less energy than we would have if we hadn't bothered with sucking it out of the ground in the first place, we're still extracting enough to have a surplus of oil and subsidising the hell out of it, which is keeping prices artificially low. And those kinds of shifts have meant that our already lackluster momentum in the direction of a more sustainable approach to energy has slowed. So let's take a quick run through some of the headline topic areas that the report covers. First up, global energy demand has grown substantially since 2000, by 60%, with much of the growth in demand experienced in what the IEA termed developing economies. As a result, global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions have increased by more than 50%. I'm pretty sure I don't need to say this, but when we're aiming to get CO2 down, increasing it by half is suboptimal. And so, in 2024, global CO2 emissions yet again hit another peak. And thanks to the US president's, and I use this phrase incredibly loosely, policy decisions, the US's previous downward trend is probably going to reverse. Hopefully the EU can continue its downward emissions trend despite that. It's down 26% in the last 20-odd years. And like I said, I'm going to try and drip feed the little bits of good news in here just to keep you not crying. And one of them is that across the world, renewable power generation deployment did indeed break records again. And also the increase in renewables met more than 70% of the increase in global energy demand. Interestingly, that's still true in emerging and developing economies, where substantially more than half of the energy generation that was added was low or zero emissions. But, and this is where things go back to looking iffy again, there's a much increased demand for energy, some of this driven by artificial intelligence, which has a staggering energy, water and computational requirement. Despite 95% of organisations seeing no measurable return on investment in AI instead mostly generating work slop, it's still being deployed in a massive way. Unfortunately, despite its frequent lack of utility, Ireland, for example, may see more than 1/3 of its entire energy usage shift to data centres by the end of next year. AI, as the UN Environment Programme notes, also produces a staggering amount of e-waste, which is an exciting problem that we can look forward to failing to adequately solve later. As a result of the increase in demand for energy, global electricity generation for data centres is currently expected to grow from 460 terawatt hours last year to 1,300 terawatt hours in 2025, while around half of that will hopefully be met by renewables. IEA state it's highly likely that in both the US and China, a significant proportion of that rise in demand will be met by coal. Especially in the US, where Mango Mussolini can't do math and thus thinks coal is cheap. Although, Even with that steep rise, data centers should still only be around 1% of global CO2 emissions. That 1% is still a lot, and that's still not helpful. Another cause of rising energy consumption is that as the world becomes more urbanized, as temperatures increase, and as the cost of air conditioners and heat pumps falls, so more and more people are driven to install them. Either because, it's reliably above 40 degrees centigrade in the summer, which has a tendency to kill people, thanks climate change, or because it's affordable when it previously wasn't. It's another one of these vicious self-reinforcing circles that climate change is full of. The melting of ice releases the trapped methane, which leads to more heating, which melts more ice. The temperature increases, so we all demand a temperature that's lower in our living spaces, consuming more power and in the process heating the planet more. Sort of like opening the fridge to cool your house. And lest you think I'm getting on some hypocritical high horse because, we have a heat pump and make extensive use of it in the summer, I don't think folks should have to go without heat pumps just because their country got a bum deal when it came to empires stealing resources and then another bum deal when it came to urbanizing. I just think that those of us who are in countries that used up the CO2 allocation for our planet should be helping those countries get these resources renewably. Another concern that gets fairly high billing is the critical minerals challenge. I can hear the whooping of the shouty bobs in the comment section now. Finally, the IEA is accepting that there aren't enough resources for the green transition. We can just keep burning coal and huffing lead and sipping our gasoline mimosas. Only, no. Actually, what it says is that resource distribution and gatekeeping is a potentially huge barrier to a green transition. While many mineral resources are actually pretty well distributed outside China, it is China that has made the investment in refining and extraction, and that means it's basically holding all the cards for everything except nickel. Now, up until recently that wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a huge issue. But then some pillock came along and decided that destabilizing world markets and levying taxes on its own citizens to put them off buying foreign products. Sorry. Censor, placing tariffs on imported goods so that foreign countries that doesn't make anyway introducing tariffs which shockingly induced other countries to develop retaliatory actions like export controls on, say, hang on, I know a song about this. Cobalt and tellurium, indium and germanium, rare earth metals technology, and all the shit we need to go green. Yeah, things we need for building technology, and that's meant the green transition technologies are subject to tariffs and export controls from other countries and is thus hamstrung. And in a slight to capitalists and economists worldwide, the IEA say, quote, fostering more diverse and resilient supply chains for critical minerals will take a concerted policy effort. Market forces alone will not deliver. Which is great for folks in functional democracies, less so for some of us. Is that economists crying again? Oh well. Okay, so we're mostly a transport-focused channel, and you're probably asking yourself, how do EVs fit in this report? Well, let's start with something we've said before, and we'll say it again. EVs aren't the solution. Part of it, yes. but not the whole thing. Electrifying transport, and that means not just electric cars, but bikes and micromobility. It means trolley buses as well as battery electric buses. It means electrifying train lines and tram lines, and where you can't reasonably move road haulage onto the rails, electrifying that too. All of that is part of getting the transportation sector emissions down. But it's not the only sector, and EVs are not the only way. The IEA notes that in 2024, electric car sales rose by 25% year on year and are expected to account for 1 in 4 cars sold in 2025. The 75% fall in battery prices between 2015 and 2024 means that EVs have become increasingly cost-effective. Indeed, in China, around 2/3 of the time they're the cheaper option when compared to traditionally fueled vehicles. And across Europe and other markets, massive expansion of public charging infrastructure has made EVs easier to use. All of that is great news. Indeed, global sales of internal combustion engine vehicles fell by 1.5% in 2024, hitting a point where they're almost 1/4 lower than their peak in 2017. The report offers multiple views of the future. One based on existing policies, one based on policies that have been announced but not necessarily passed yet, and which may not be passed, and one based on net zero by 2050. Oh, and one additional one based on improving clean cooking and electricity access. Okay, you might wonder why cooking specifically. Well, across much of the world, cooking means lighting a fire with wood, kerosene, charcoal, or some other burnable substance. Since they're often just open hearths, that means smoke inhalation because the smoke is just going into the air of the home where it's inhaled by the occupants. These tiny particulates, like the ones released by car exhausts, cause pneumonia, heart disease, strokes, and lung cancer, and can cause miscarriages. In addition, it also releases a staggering amount of CO2. CO2 from polluting cooking sources is roughly equivalent to that of the aviation sector, so helping countries implement policies that mean that people get access to clean cooking stoves and electricity, it's just a win all round. So under the current policy's future, EVs would account for around 40% of new passenger cars sold in 2035, with China and Europe taking the lion's share of that technological advancement. The report also notes, dispiritingly, that the size of new vehicles sold in recent years has grown. SUVs, which it points out use around 15% more fuel than an average medium-sized car, are now around 30% of the global car fleet and account for about 50% of all new car sales. That has undercut improvements in fuel efficiency, and without some kind of policy change to, slow the growth of this segment of the market, which you already know my opinions on, it is assumed SUVs will continue to take up more and more space and more resources. So current policies aren't terrible in some places, but in the US, thanks to the Trump and Republican hobbling of the US's ability to advance, it's not a great future for EVs in the USA. It's a better technology, so as long as someone's building them and they aren't taxed into oblivion or made as illegal as a trans person trying to use a public loo, then people will still buy them. I, sure as hell, do not want to go back to a daily driver being gasoline. I barely even consider it for my classic car. Even not dealing with the hassle of fueling, the amount of time I spend dealing with servicing, it's just so tedious. But where the real pain point is electric trucking. Road freight is responsible for around 40% of road transport energy demand today, more than 90% of which is provided by burning oil. Fuel economy for ICE trucks has only improved 0.5% per year since 2014. IEA indicate that improvements in economy are likely to drop to around 0.1% going forward, which means that energy use from heavy trucking rises dramatically, with urbanization sucking up nearly 80% of the energy growth in road freight demand. This could be offset by electric heavy goods vehicles and railways, which we could fund in the US if we stopped massively subsidizing domestic air travel and fossil fuels. It is possible that we could have nice things here. But of course that needs policy, which means being able to retain and process information more complicated than is expressed in where's spot, something that seems a challenge for rather a lot of Congress critters and our lame duck dictator these days. As things look, Europe and China will streak ahead, with cost savings and CO2 savings from electric haulage, but the US will continue to pour money into loss-making gasoline vehicles at the same time as destroying the planet. Okay, I wanted to lean into the positive, but to be honest, this report is sobering reading. It's also kind of hilarious because it says all these things about 2050 that are predicated on us having a functioning social and economic system that looks much the same as the one we have now, despite massive climate shifts that will make food production impossible in large areas where we currently produce food. That will make vast swathes of the world essentially impossible to reasonably occupy and lead to mass migration. That will also lead to horrific, widespread pandemics and new novel diseases. You know this. I know this. We all know this. But the report goes on to draw conclusions about what our CO2 emissions will look like in this theoretical circumstance where we've had 2 degrees of warming at minimum and everything else about society is still just hunky-dory. But we know from COVID that our supply chains, our systems, our society does not cope well with the kinds of shocks that we're talking about. So yeah, like the good news, the best bits are that we've seen tons of investment in renewable energy manufacturing. There's actually a massive surplus in global photovoltaic manufacturing right now. Twice as much capacity as was produced last year. There's nearly 3 times the capacity for battery cells than was needed last year, at least according to the IEA. And with the announced policies, China hits 50% renewables for energy generation within a decade. As it stands, estimated Chinese solar photovoltaic panel exports to Pakistan since 2023 could power roughly 1/3 of its electricity generation, and solar photovoltaics alone may make up more capacity than conventional generation. Chinese manufactured low-cost electric cars are seeing rapid sales growth in some emerging EV markets, and EV sales shares there are now larger than in some quote-unquote advanced economies, undoubtedly aided by the fact they're not just cheaper to run, they also require minimal maintenance. But on the other hand, 1,700 gigawatt hours of renewable energy projects are stuck because of slow permitting, because of rules put in place to deliberately hobble renewable generation, because there's no interconnection to the grid available, and that's because grid spending has dropped from 60 cents per dollar on generation to 40 cents per dollar. So there's this infographic. I'm not going to tell you what I called the file when I put it on my computer, but it has a lot to do with my mood after reading chunks of the report, so I'll leave you to guess. There's a running joke in the trans community about transition, that the best time to transition was whenever you first started feeling discomfort or distress. But the next best time, having lost those years, is now. I can't help but feel that that applies here too. And so, rather than me try and find some false positive in this to bore you with, I'm going to instead read you a quote. It's somewhat edited here for length, and there are things in it that you can't say on a YouTube channel, so I think the full source is worth reading. This is our darkest hour. The science is clear. We are in the 6th mass extinction event, and we will face catastrophe if we do not act swiftly and robustly. We, in alignment with our consciences and our reasoning, declare ourselves against the corrupted, inept institutions that threaten our future. We demand to be heard, to apply informed solutions to these ecological crises, and to initiate those solutions needed to change our present cataclysmic course. We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace, with a ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. Thanks for watching today! You can connect with us on Patreon, Discord, Mastodon, Blue Sky, or through our website. Massive thanks to the amazing folks scrolling by right now. You are the reason we can stay independent and keep making content without corporate influence. Want to see your name here too, or possibly have it mispronounced by me? Support starts at just $1.50 a month, and you can even gift memberships. And of course, a massive welcome to our newest members: Adam B, Andrew Brown, Tiara Graves, Philip Jackson, Dieter Multhorpe, Nur Knife, Anonymous, Todd Plenes, Beruz Shariati, Andreas Stasiak, Ralph Stoltz, Richard Teague, Triple A He They, Lisa Vaji, Vicky Morales, Magpie Motors, and Travis Whitman. Thank you for joining up to support the channel. At this particular time in history when everyone's feeling the pinch, we are so grateful you've joined the team, and that helps us keep making great content. If you'd like to join them, you'll find our Patreon link below, or you can sign up via YouTube. If you're signing up for Patreon though, please use the Patreon website. Do not use the Apple or Google app, since both take a big cut that hurts your wallet and reduces the income we receive. Prefer a one-off contribution? We've got Ko-fi, Bitcoin, a PO box, our swag store, and even an Amazon affiliate link. All great ways to make sure your money helps us. We post new videos every few days in the main channel, plus extras over on TE Take 2, and since YouTube comments, while open, aren't safe for us, the best way to chat is through Patreon, Mastodon, Blue Sky, or on our website, or, in fact, our very own Discord chat. If you want more, the algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we'd love you to check out this one instead. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and never forget to resist. Keep evolving!